we're obviously making our way away from the trust now. Where are we going today?
We're heading for a site just along the A32 near Westmere. We've got about 1,000 sites where we've got nest boxes, but for today's purposes we're just going down to south central Hampshire.
Okay. And how do you pick and choose where you're going to go each day?
Usually it's based on the status of each box. So I try and get around all of the boxes in April and May, so I know when they've laid their eggs. This is Kestrels. And so I can work out when I need to return to do the ringing, weighing, measuring and monitoring and fledging of the chicks. So it just turns out that today's a good day for this particular nest box.
And so we're expecting to see some young chicks in the nest?
Yeah, the chicks in this box should be around about 3 to 4 weeks old, so they're pretty big. Today I'll be taking the chicks out of the box, weighing them, measuring their wing length, measuring the length of their legs, fitting them with a BTO metal ring and an individually identifiable colouring. So it's a plastic ring that you can read in the field, so it means I don't have to catch the bird again. I can watch where it goes and keep track of it once it's left the nest. Once I've finished doing all my stuff and putting them back, and it's the last time I'll see them before they fledge, I'm not sure I want to admit this, I always wish them good luck.
So your love of birds then, has that been lifelong for you?
Yeah, pretty much since I was about 7 I've been obsessed with birds. I always knew what I wanted to do. So.
And do you know what started that?
No, not really. I think I was fortunate. Although I lived on a housing estate, it was right on the edge of a city, so so much of my time was spent out with my mates, just playing in the fields. So we'd always be out, and you'd always be doing stuff you weren't supposed to be doing, but seeing lots of things. So you're exposed to hares boxing and lots of birds around everywhere. And it just grew from that. We've got some volunteers who go out regularly to try and get a fix on where these birds are. So they go out in places where we know kestrels are likely to be and try and read the colourings. And once we've got information on a colouring resighting, so if a bird is seen at a particular location, I try and get the volunteer to also record what the bird's doing, whether it's a male or female, to try and confirm my determination of its sex when it's ringing time. And try and build up a picture of movements, because obviously with around about 250 kestrel boxes, I said we've got 1,000 boxes, but that's across the 4 species we cover. With 250 boxes and around about 60 to 80 used each year, that's a lot of chicks produced. So there's a lot of things to monitor, and I can't do all that on my own. So I really need volunteers to help try and see these birds.
So how far would you expect to travel in a day when you're doing your rounds, Matt?
Usually it's around about 100 to 200 miles in a day, but that's all quite heavily pre-planned. So I know when birds are going to be ready to ring, or I know the route that I want to take, and I work out a circuit that means that I can get round lots of boxes in the fewest miles.
After a 45-minute drive from the Hawk Conservancy Trust, we arrive at the site where we check our first nest box.
How do they look, Matt?
2.
Fantastic.
At least 2.
What have we got the net there for, Matt?
Well, if the birds are quite mature, which these should be, they get quite jumpy. Right. So it helps me keep them in the box so they don't scatter. So here's one.
Matt carefully removes the chicks from the nest and places them in a cotton bag. His expertise means that the chicks are well looked after throughout the process.
There's number 2.
Good Certainly got a healthy set of lungs anyway.
Yes. And I leave the net over the entrance just in case the parents fly past, so they know the nest isn't empty.
Okay.
It shouldn't be a problem anyway, because with them making so much noise, the parents know that they're still here.
Is that kind of an average clutch size for these birds?
No, not really. At many sites this year, they've been having 4s and 5s, so it's a bit lower than expected, but there's still 2 eggs up there. So,
okay.
But they're healthy, so that's good. Let's go and do the ringing.
We're sat here in the shade. It's quite a sunny day. What are we going to do next?
Well, what we want to do is weigh and measure the chicks. We want to try and get a decent estimate of their hatch date. So by measuring the length of the primaries, so the longest feathers on their outermost part of their wing, it gives us a means of working out how old the birds are, so how many days it is since they hatched.
Okay.
We'll also fit a BTO ring, one of these, which stays on the bird for the entirety of its life. And one of these, which is a plastic material which has a unique 3-digit alphanumeric code, which allows me to then follow birds and identify them in the field. So you can't do that with these, but these have a much longer lifespan. So as we discussed, we like to get volunteers involved. So we're trying to build up a network of volunteers to go out and look for our kestrels. I call them our kestrels, but they're everybody's kestrels, obviously. But yeah, what we'd like to do is for people to keep an eye open with binoculars, check any adult looking kestrels, so any fully developed kestrels that are flying around, check those that are on wires or on posts, because that's when they stand up, and these rings are then quite nicely visible on their legs.
Now, this has been a lifelong passion for you. Do you still feel that spark of enthusiasm when you're doing your job?
Yeah, how can you not, really? Because it doesn't matter how many times you see lots of these things, there's always something slightly different about it. There's always something rewarding and uplifting about seeing kestrels taking their first flights, or seeing barn owls flying past in an area where you didn't see them before because you've got a box up, or having little owls sitting down just fledged beneath the box, lined up on a road verge. There are countless things that are enjoyable. So a good weight for a kestrel at this age is about 220, 230.
Absolutely tiny then, really, aren't they, as a species?
Yeah, they're not very big at all. So with the bag, this one is a little bit small, but it sometimes gives an indication of whether it's a male or female, because females tend to be larger. On a male, they're usually quite nice, sort of slaty blue, with very little in the way of black, but they don't tend to have the sort of gingery coloration on them. This one's a bit of a mixture of both. So
Right.
It's probably a female, but I wouldn't like to say for certain.
We expect that coloration to get more prominent as they get older.
Yeah, it can take a few months to sort of grow in, but if it's a bright male, it's usually quite obvious when they're this age. So next we'll put the metal ring on. These have a unique code on. They also have a web address, which, if the bird is unfortunately found dead anywhere, and it's got one of these on, if you send the details, the number that's written on this ring or inscribed on this ring to the address, you'll get the information about where the bird was ringed. At the same time, I also get an email telling me where the bird's been found. So it allows me to get some idea of how far they've moved and how long it is since they were ringed. I always feel incredibly privileged to do this. Because, yeah, how many people do? It's a wild animal.
What kind of keeps you going as a conservationist?
That's a difficult question. I love birds. I can't think of anything that I'd rather do. So although it's perhaps not the most politic thing to say, I think of it all from the perspective of the wildlife that I enjoy rather than people's perspective. And I understand that's important, but it's our responsibility to make sure that all those things that we see around us have the best opportunity to do as well as they can. So yeah, that's what I focus on, and that's what I love doing. This next measure measures one of the longer primaries on the wing. So I tend to always use this same one.
So these ones are They're still growing through.
Yeah. So by doing this, it allows me to work out how long it is since the bird hatched by comparing it with a graph that I have. So now I measure the width of their legs at the narrowest point, and then just the length of its beak. Okay. So I use a little bit of cement which melts the two bits of plastic together. Doesn't have any effect on the bird. I get a lot of it on my fingers, but it just helps to keep those together. It's the same sort of glue that you use in plumbing. It sets very quickly, so that means it rotates nicely, moves up and down the leg, so it's not going to cause any sort of problems to the bird. And that's it.
After successfully weighing, measuring and ringing the first chick, Matt repeats the same process with the second young kestrel.
You only have to see the size of this one though. It's very fat.
So will Mum and Dad have been and fed these chicks already this morning, do you think?
Probably. Usually they'll bring maybe somewhere between 14 and 20 prey items per day.
Wow.
So it's quite a lot of work for the parents.
Absolutely.
And if you imagine that with 6 chicks, at this age they're generally quite nicely behaved. They're not too bad at all. When they're slightly younger, there's a lot of kicking, a lot of scratching, a lot of biting.
So it's highly competitive in that nest then between the chicks?
Yeah, although before I go there, when I just stick my camera up to have a look, they tend to be sat there quite contentedly. They're not doing much. They're conserving energy. They're not wasting anything at all. 69.5. So I like to know what happens. I like to know where they go. I get slightly upset if I realise that some haven't fledged. The majority that gets to this age do leave the nest successfully, but occasionally I find some that don't make it, and that's not a happy day.
It can't always be sunshine as we got today.
No, it can get quite cold, it can get quite wet, and also there are various frustrations. You know, it doesn't seem like it would be stressful, but trying to get between boxes before things leave can become a bit, it's always there in the back of my head, even at night. Last thing at night, I'm thinking, have I missed those chicks or whatever? But the most frustrating things are when either I can't get to a site, or if something's happened. I've had a couple of sites where the boxes have been destroyed by people for no apparent reason. Right. These are both done, so we should put them back.
Time to go back in the nest. Good luck, BD4.
Yeah.
And I'm told that everything you see, you write down.
Yeah, I do. For every day I have a list of everything seen with some extra information, some more detail, not just birds. It can be unusual plants or unusual insects, butterflies, you name it. There are even some fish in here.
And it's all in that little black book?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, more than 10 years, having a list for every day, having notes for every day. So I've got lots of these books at home.
And you've got plenty to write down from today?
A reasonable amount, yeah.
En route back to the trust, we stop off to check on another nest site, this time just for a visual check of the young birds and their box.
So how many nest boxes are up as part of this project, Matt?
Well, the project's been going since 2008. I started 2011. From about 30 boxes then, we're now up to about just shy of 1,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you have to check all of those?
Well, I do get other assistance. So I've got some volunteers at sort of partner organisations, if you like. So the South Downs National Park Authority, I have help from them. Some of their rangers check boxes for me. And I have other volunteers that check some boxes as well. So it's not all me.
Have a little bit of help.
A little bit, yeah, it's all useful.
And the expensive things of nest boxes.
They are, but we've been trying to go towards using materials that are cheaper, obviously, because some of the materials, like this one, which is made of ply, only last for about 3 or 4 years, which is not great. So even if they're proper external grade materials, exposure to the sun, exposure to the rain, ice, snow, and all the stuff that Kestrels produce means that they don't last that long. So that box would have cost about £15 to £20 initially to make. Right. That's just material costs. But we're moving towards a plastic material. Again, not ideal, but that works out at around about £5 to make, and they have even longer lifespan than these. So it makes sense, yeah. 4.
4 chicks?
Yeah.
Wow.
About 2.5 weeks old.
So is that too early for ringing?
It's okay to ring them at this age, but because there's a chance that not all of them will make it, I prefer to leave it until they're slightly older, so that I know then the outcome of the nest. Because if I ring them now, I probably wouldn't return again until after they'd fledged. Yeah. So then I don't really know what's happened.
So are there any aspects of the Kestrel project that people can get involved with?
Yes, we've talked about the colourings, so people can send us their observations of colouring birds. There is also, they can let us know if they see or hear of any nesting kestrels in our area, so anywhere sort of in central southern England. We're interested to receive any sort of reports of nesting kestrels. And there's also, we have a larger project looking at estimating population density of kestrels across southeastern England. That involves people walking certain routes for me at certain times of year and recording the birds they see, not just kestrels, red kites and buzzards as well. So they can get involved with that. That's operating across 8 counties: Oxfordshire, Berkshire, Hampshire, Surrey, East Sussex, West Sussex and Kent. So if they want to get involved with that, then just drop us an email and we'll get back to them with information.
And does the outlook feel good for the project and for the work of the Trust?
Yes. You know, we try and garner as much support as possible. We try and extend our reach and get the message out to more people to have an interest in these species. And not just these species, all bird species and all wildlife. So although we're the Conservancy Trust, it's not just about raptors, it's about everything, because everything works together. So I think as long as there are young people getting interested in birds and the wildlife and conservation, allied to the army of older people that are interested, then yeah, the outlook should be good.
Conducting our conservation and research work costs a lot, but all contributions, however big or small, are extremely valuable. Just £10 could help us buy the rings to fit to a family of kestrels. £25 could give a kestrel family a home. £100 could provide the equipment to help us monitor bird of prey populations. And £500 could help us buy nest box construction materials for a whole year.